So this is my first response to my first reflection. So I was giving questions on my reflection, and then I just have to respond to those. Again, thinking critically and reflecting upon the questions and the first day that I was in my placement. So the first question that I had was, why were you not the student given the first flute part, and what does that say to that student? And what does it say about the values being prioritized? What might be done differently, and why? Um, at first, I was a little bit confused as to why I was given the first flute part because I had already assumed that the student would have been given it because they are the ones who are actually in the program and not me. But then I think the first flute who they had initially had there, who was also a student, I think she stopped coming or she just was finished with the program or something because I'd gotten her folder which had her name and everything on it. So I'm assuming that there was another student before. Um, and then I guess the student that I was sitting with, he's always been second flute, and she must have always been first because all of her music in her folder was also first. Where I got a bit more confused was that the student that they have playing second flute, he's actually a very strong kid. And I did definitely feel that he would have been able to play the first flute part. I don't understand why it wasn't given to him, but maybe reflecting on it, it might be that I'm only there an hour a week, so I'm not able to come in when they have their small sectional rehearsals throughout the week. So maybe no one was sitting there and focusing with him to get him to learn the first flute part, or um, that they just didn't have the time to teach him. I'm not quite sure what was happening there, and I did want to ask, but I kind of just kept my mouth quiet and did what I was told. Which again, it wasn't the best thing because I really genuinely should have asked why I was given the first and he was given the second. But again, at that point, I was already in the program so late that even if we had switched it over, I feel like it might have been too different for him to learn at that point. But I definitely feel like looking back at it now that I really wish I kind of asked and had given it to him because I really did want him to have it and for him to play it. But I think I just still felt very nervous and uncomfortable because this was still like my first time there, especially when I was there the first 3 weeks. So I think I was a little bit nervous to speak up at that point because I was new and I wasn't there that long, so I didn't know how much my opinion or voice would matter. But I think looking forward as the next weeks come, I might ask and see what type of parts they have and if I can move him up or if I can like stay behind and help him with some stuff to get him to move up. I think that would be really good. What does it say to the student? I don't think it sets a good teacher student like relationship because he probably was hoping to have the first flute part, especially since he is the only flute there. So I'm really hoping it didn't upset him. But he did still ask me throughout the weeks like how to play with vibrato or how to play with different like extended like techniques that you would like advanced techniques. And I was more than happy obviously to help him. So I think that might have made up for it, or I think maybe he was just happy sitting with someone else, someone who was older who could play, because he did find it interesting that I had like a flute stand for my flute and a specific case and like a specific way to clean it. Um, so I think he might have been interested in that. But other than that, he was a relatively quiet student as well, so he didn't really say too much. I think it does say a lot about the values being prioritized on someone who's older, because there's that assumption that because you're older, you will set a good role, set a good model, and you will be able to play confidently. Whereas it's like, well, does that mean that you don't trust the younger student to learn it? Like, why would you not allow him to learn it and see if he could play it or play it with me, just so he has the experience of playing a first flute part? Because the notes are quite a lot higher, but I don't think that he's like incapable of playing it. I genuinely do think he can play it. Um, I think maybe once what they could have done was once they found out that the other student was leaving who usually plays first, they could have either given him the first book and given me the second one so that he could have started learning it before I'd even entered the program, or they shouldn't keep it. I understand it's an orchestra, but I don't think they should keep it where they keep one person on first all the time and one person on second all the time, especially since he's strong. And if you want him to get stronger, I feel like you should be mixing up the parts a bit more just so they both have equal opportunity because both parts are parts that you can learn from. Like second is not better than first, and first is not second than better than second. They're both learning opportunities. Um, the next question was, when you observe negative feedback being met with responses of fear or hostility, what impact does that have on the learning environment? The kids actually I'm still observing it because I don't really understand what's going on yet. Because to me, it's very odd that the students do listen to the director, but then they still act in a way sometimes that can be like disobedient or I don't know, like um, immature because they just don't like, or they retaliate, sorry, because they just don't like the way that he is or the way that he's acting. But then at the same time, they still show up week after week to come and play and they still enjoy being there with their friends. Um, so I think I'm still trying to understand what this whole environment is and what the vibe kind of is of it because I do understand. I think there's a level of respect for him because they do keep quiet when they need to. But there are times where individually some people will lash out or they will retaliate and say something back or just sit there and not want to be a part of it because maybe he's called them out or said something. So I think I'm still trying to understand the environment and kind of get a grasp of like personalities and what's going on. I'm definitely like observing and seeing what's going on, but it's just taking me a little longer, which I find interesting because usually I can tell right away what the teacher style is and what the children are like and what their relationships like. But I'm having a really hard time understanding that for this place. Um, the next part was you even noted feeling nervous, intimidated, and being hard on yourself. What might have been done differently to facilitate an environment more conducive to learning? More conducive, sorry, to learning and less so to stress or fear. Again, I think this is sitting on the conductor's personality because all the children are really lovely and I enjoy sitting with them and all the other student volunteers are really awesome to be around. But sometimes I feel like you're kind of walking on eggshells with the way that you either respond to a question or the way that you ask him something, which is hard because then it sucks for me to have to sit there and overanalyze the question that I'm going to ask him or overanalyze the response that I'm going to give him to something he's asked me, right? Um, and obviously, you don't want to have that feeling like between yourself and someone who you're working under. Um, but I'm trying to break that barrier and just get over the feeling of feeling nervous about asking him questions and stuff. Um, because I'm sure there's reasons as to why his personality is the way it is. I'm sure that maybe he's dealt with specific things in his life that have impacted him to act the way that he does, or for him to speak and think that the way he does. I'm sure there's a backstory. I don't believe that people will come out and be negative towards students or be snippy towards kids. Like, I think that there has to be something that had led that person up to that point to act that way and treat people that way. And I'm not saying that he's treating people horribly, but there are things that I would have changed with the way that, again, that he responds to children or gives instructions and stuff. Um, and I think that obviously ties in with me being hard on myself and being nervous because when I'm playing, I don't want to be the one to get told that, oh, that was wrong. Because I know that because I'm so intimidated by him and scared of him, that if I were to get that comment at the age of 21, I probably would maybe start tearing up because maybe it is that I'm oversensitive, or maybe it's just because I've built up this fear between um, the way that I see him and our relationship. So I think that's what kind of ties in again to how to facilitate an environment. Like it sucks for me to have to go there um, the like week after week and say, okay, we're just gonna try and get through this hour. And I enjoy being there again. I'm not saying that I don't like my placement, but I think it's just having that fear just before stepping into the building because I just don't know um, if there's something that I'm going to do that could upset him or make him say something to me in front of the kids. Um, Especially when I want to show that I am strong, for them to show them this is how you can be a good role model. And when you're dealing with conflicts, like you need to be strong, which is hard because you are the older student. So obviously you want to try and do that. But yeah, I think that's what really makes me nervous about the environment and is making me think about the way that he's really teaching. So that was my response for my first video.